Hey, I'm Bill Burr, and I'm just checking in on ya! About a month ago, I couldn't help but notice that every single time I logged into WoW, I had very long loading times. Anytime I reloaded my UI, long loading time. When I was doing things like a raid, for example, my FPS dropped to the teens, which I haven't seen since, like, Wrath of the Lich King. And just to be sure it wasn't a computer issue, I disabled all of my add-ons, and sure enough, my loading times decreased, and my FPS skyrocketed. I was getting a minimum of 50 FPS in raids, up to 100 in the middle of fights. So I decided to leave my add-ons disabled for 1 month to see, 1, what do I actually need? And 2, can I get by with just a default Blizzard interface? And my results were kind of what I expected, to be honest. But before I tell you my conclusion, let me tell you everything that happened. First of all, I would love to use the default Blizzard UI. If it could be everything that I needed, I would never use an add-on again. For example, I stopped using SexyMap about a year ago because the minimap position I was finally able to move. I still wish I could make the minimap a square so it sits nicely in the corner, but I can do with what I have. Or in the past, I used to use an add-on that would track my buffs and my debuffs to make them look like they do now. But I can do that with the default UI, so I don't need that add-on anymore. But when I disabled all my add-ons, almost immediately it felt jarring. Even when I was able to make my UI look familiar, it was still off. It was different. Because without them enabled, I constantly felt like I was missing some sort of functionality. But let's talk about the actual 4 weeks that went by. I turned off my add-on, spent some time going through the default UI, and I was kind of surprised to see that there were a lot of improvements made since the new UI came out in Dragonflight. You can do more things in edit mode, which is great. I was able to get my UI looking pretty similar to how I have it with add-ons. But within the same day that I disabled all of my add-ons, I turned 2 right back on. The first one I turned on was TomTom, which I use almost daily, especially for achievements. But the second one was WeakAuras because it's mandatory to be able to play. As a warrior, I don't really have that many things I need to keep track of, but enrage is a big part of my rotation, and making sure that my warrior is enraged is important. Without WeakAuras, I constantly have to be looking up at my buffs, looking for the enrage buff, and then mentally counting down from 7 or however many seconds it's up, before I look back up and see where is it. And that's annoying by itself, but the buff is never in the same place, so I always have to look very quickly throughout all my buffs while I'm trying not to die in the middle of a raid, for example. But when I have WeakAuras enabled, I just have a WeakAura that tells me exactly when I'm enraged and how long that'll last. Without that, there is no indicator anywhere on my character or anywhere else besides the buff bar. So this is an area specifically where I think that Blizzard had recently said they were trying to refocus on the new player experience, and I think this should be one of the top priorities in that mission. Having a way to uniquely identify things about your character would not only benefit new players, but also experienced players alike. I shouldn't need an add-on to know a critical part of my class has activated. That was one of the things that I almost immediately was like, I cannot play without this. Another add-on that I enabled actually a few days after this whole thing started was Scrap. Scrap is just used for quickly selling trash items, but the thing that sets it apart from just the default Blizzard UI is that you can manually set what items are trash. So for example, after I finish a Dragon Soul run, I can in the default UI click sell trash and it'll sell all the grays and stuff. But then I have to go through every single piece of gear that I got and manually right click it to sell it. Whereas with Scrap, the first time I see that piece of loot drop, I set that as junk, and then in the future, I just hit the junk item when I open a vendor, and it will sell everything that I've set as junk. So because Dragon Soul just doesn't have mounts in it apparently, when I'm done the run, I just spend maybe 10 seconds clicking the sell junk item, and all the epics that I don't need just sell. This is a quality of life improvement that saves me time, and I just need to have when I'm playing. But outside of those 3 add-ons, I was able to play the entire month without my add-ons, but it was still not great. BigWigs and LittleWigs were add-ons that I figured probably wouldn't matter that much to me. I'm not a progression raider, I don't really push keys that much, but having a timer so I know, for example, when the boss is going to be spawning ads so I can save my cooldowns for AoE spam is great. Having a giant text at the top of my screen that yells at me when I have a bad debuff is super helpful. Because sometimes I don't know when I have certain things on me. Like when there's a circle on me, I don't know if it's me or the person next to me. So I have to do this little like shimmy back and forth to see if the circle follows my character. It wasn't impossible for me to get by without using these, but it's definitely a hindrance on my gameplay. But then from there were add-ons that, like I said earlier, without them, the game just felt jarring, and in some cases just straight up annoying. The default unit frames are bulky and just look bad. For some reason, I can't hide my character portrait or my target portrait, or seeing the incoming damage and heals on my character portrait. Like, I don't care about this either. Seeing my health and resources was surprisingly difficult. The green bar kind of just meshed in with everything else and is small, so I would constantly be panic casting defensives. And the obvious solution to this is just to make the bars bigger, but I can't without also making the character portrait bigger. I could enable the personal resource bar in the middle of my screen, but I just don't like that. There's also things I just can't do with the default UI still, like for example move my target's target frame. I can't move the dungeon queuing eye on its own because it also moves the game menu, which also I can't hide. Like, why do I need to see this? I have never in my entire time playing WoW used the game menu bar once. I have an escape button on my keyboard for a reason. Same with the bag bar. I have never opened my bags by clicking this button. Why can't I hide this? I can't hide the talking head window, which has driven me absolutely insane since it was introduced in Legion. I hate this so much. When I loot something, it just shows up in the middle of my screen and I can't change that. The default bags look great. Being able to combine them all into one is awesome. But for some reason I can't do that with my bank bags or my warband tabs. I can't see ability cooldowns on the action bar, which I know the diligent among you will say, Billiam, did you know there's an option for that? Yes, I do know that, but it turns off every single time I close WoW, so I have to keep turning it back on. And bugs happen, that's a normal part of any game, but this was reported as early as April of 2023, nearly 2 years ago. It's a great feature that I would ditch OmniCC for, but it simply doesn't work. So if I wanted to see my cooldowns, which I do, I have to use this add-on. So that's why I can't get rid of Baganator or shadowed unit frames. With Baganator, I can combine all of my bags, bank and warband tab included. But I also have additional things like I can see the item level of items in my bags. Or I can hover over an item and see how many of that item I have on my character, including in my bank. And I can see how many of that item I have on other characters. These are small quality of life changes that do make a big impact even if I don't utilize them on a daily basis. Shadowed unit frames provides so much flexibility too, like not having character portraits, for example. And all the things I was talking about that I can't move or I can't resize. And for that I just use Dominos, because with Dominos I have that ability. I can hide the talking head box, I can hide the game menu in the bag bar, and I can move the dungeon eye wherever I want it. And it also provides action bars, which that was the one thing with the default UI that actually worked. I didn't have any issues with the action bars. I made them look exactly how I wanted them and they worked fine. But if I'm using Dominos already for all that other stuff, why not just use the action bars as well? And then as the days went on, I started to miss some of the more functional add-ons that I probably would delete if Blizzard incorporated them into the game. The game is playable without them, but they all provide quality of life improvements that I really enjoy having. And playing for a month without them made me appreciate them so much more. Angry Keystones gives me more information about the Mythic Plus key that I'm in, like the thresholds on how to 2 or 3 chest it. DejaCharacterStats gives me a little bit more information in the character select screen, including decimals. I can also see the item level of my equipped gear, which is a nice way to quickly see what I may want to upgrade. Krowi's achievement filter is great for someone like me who works on a lot of achievements. I can filter by specific expansions or zones and even see hidden achievements that I otherwise wouldn't know about. Postal simply remembers the last person I sent mail to, which is always going to be my bank alt. I know I can use the warbank, I'm just so used to sending mail that I don't even think about it. TipTac updates the tooltip window and makes it look way more sleek and nice, but it also adds class colors so I can quickly distinguish what class it is that I'm looking at. It also lets me have more information such as the person's item level and their Mythic Plus score, which that is great when I'm in a pug group and I don't have to manually search up people's IO to see whether or not I should trust this group or not. It also lets me see what mount they're currently on and if I have it, which is something that is actually pretty important for me. I can't tell you the number of times I've seen someone on a mount and thought, oh wow, that's sick. Went searching through their buffs looking for the mount, only for them to dismount or log out or start casting something. World Quest Tracker neatly organizes world quests on the map for me so I don't have to go into each specific zone and hover over the quest to see what it is and what it rewards. I can just quickly see everything I need in one window and choose which world quests I want to focus on. But there were some add-ons that I don't really need, and they provide very specific customization options for my UI and really only take up space. These are the add-ons that I'm going to keep disabled for now, but I do miss having them. Friend list colors adds the level and class color to my friends lists when people are in WoW. I just really like the way this looks, and having a little bit more information right off the hop as to what people are playing is just nice to see. HandyNotes map provides information on exactly where all the vendors are in a city, or where I can find portals, or where the entrance and exits are to each zone. So for example, I know where I can go from Ringing Deeps to Ashgahet. Having a bit of information is always nice. NameplateAuras adds debuffs onto health bars of enemies, which the Blizzard UI already does, but with this add-on I can scale these to make them bigger and also see a timer for how long they'll stay on. Paragon Reputation makes it so that I can see Paragon reps as regular rep in the window rather than having to hover over a bag icon to see what my rep is at. This could be such a simple and quick fix, like I don't know why this isn't the default functionality in the UI. And then Prat is a chat add-on that lets me see people's levels, has a search function, lets me open a box so I can copy things such as links from chat, And it also lets me hover over gear or achievements and see what they are without clicking them or seeing right in chat whether I completed an achievement or not. Like I said, these are add-ons that I don't really need. They provide very specific things, but I do miss having them. So after all that, what did I learn from my month of playing without my add-ons? I learned that firstly, the default Blizzard experience is passable. It's in a much better place than it was when it was first introduced, and it offers some pretty decent customization options, and in a pinch, wouldn't hurt to have set up just in case a new patch or expansion launches and all your add-ons are broken. But there are still a lot of things that annoy me or aren't quite to my liking. I went into this experience thinking that a lot of the add-ons that I have were simply for aesthetics, and they didn't really provide that much functionality, and I'd be fine without the majority of them. What I discovered is that a lot of my add-ons do make my interface look nice, but almost all of them offer some sort of quality of life or functionality change, addition, or improvement that is anywhere from useful to critical while I'm playing. I learned that outside of the few add-ons that I mentioned at the end, I don't really have a lot of bloat. So it doesn't look like I'll be regaining much FPS or improving my loading times unless I actively enable and disable certain add-ons based on what I'm doing. And what started as trying to see what add-ons I don't need ended up being an exercise in seeing how much I actually not only need in some cases, but enjoy having the add-ons that I have. So unfortunately for me, the 60 FPS raid is probably not going to happen anytime soon, but at least my UI will look nice. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of this whole experiment and whether or not you could play without add-ons for a month or more. And with add-ons, they make all the time that we spend in WoW more enjoyable. But is all the time we spend in-game pointless? To hear my thoughts on that, click the video that's on screen now. Thanks for watching, love you lots, go f yourself, and I'll talk at you later.